In the sterile hum of a hospital, where hope battles hardship, a single act of kindness can spark a love that defies all odds. Kindness in the Rain weaves the tender tale of Madeline Harper, a beautiful yet struggling cleaner, and Dr. Theo Langston, a millionaire physician whose heart sees beyond status. Through quiet moments, her laughter with children, his care in crisis, their worlds collide, proving love grows not from wealth, but from empathy and courage. What happens when self-doubt threatens to drown their budding connection? Can a faded payslip and a rainy kiss rewrite their story? Stay to find out. If this resonates, subscribe to our channel for more soul-stirring stories, and share in the comments where you're listening from. Your corner of the world matters. Don't miss how a small gesture becomes a beacon of hope. Keep watching. The heart of this tale awaits. The hospital exhaled a sterile sigh, its corridors steeped in the sharp tang of antiseptic and the faint hum of fluorescent lights that flickered like restless spirits. At 2 a.m., the emergency room was a muted chaos, wheels squeaking on gurneys, monitors beeping in distant rooms, and the low murmur of nurses trading clipped updates. Madeline Harper moved through it all like a ghost, her mop tracing slow, deliberate arcs across the linoleum floor. At 27, she was a vision of quiet beauty. Long black hair cascaded over her shoulders, framing a face with high cheekbones and emerald eyes that held a depth of unspoken dreams. But tonight, those eyes were shadowed, dulled by a bone-deep exhaustion that clung to her like damp cloth. Her hands, rough from endless scrubbing, gripped the mop handle tightly, as if it were an anchor in a storm. Madeline's life was a tightrope stretched thin. By day, she cleaned the hospital's endless floors. By night, she sat by her mother Eleanor's bedside in their cramped apartment, counting out heart medication with trembling precision. Eleanor's condition, congestive heart failure, demanded pills that cost more than Madeline's weekly pay, leaving no room for luxuries like new shoes or a moment's rest. Each swipe of the mop was a silent prayer, a plea to keep the lights on, to keep her mother breathing. She wore an oversized sweater, its sleeves frayed, not for warmth but to hide the thinness of her frame, the way her collarbones jutted beneath her skin. Hunger was a familiar companion, one she'd learned to ignore. Yet even in her weariness, Madeline carried a light. In stolen moments between shifts, she'd slip into the pediatric ward, where the air was softer, tinged with the scent of crayons and antiseptic. There, she transformed. Her laughter, bright and unguarded, danced with the children as she folded paper cranes or played hide-and-seek behind IV poles. "Maddie, make another bird," a small girl with pigtails would beg, and Madeline would oblige, her deft fingers crafting delicate wings, while her heart ached for the childhood she'd never fully had. To the kids, she was magic. To herself, she was just surviving, pouring what little she had into others because it was the only way she knew to keep going. Across the hospital, in a quiet corner of the ER, Dr. Theo Langston stood over a chart, his pen scratching notes in precise, controlled strokes. At 32, Theo was a study in contrasts. Golden blonde hair, neatly combed, blue eyes, sharp with focus, yet softened by a warmth that set patients at ease. His white coat bore his name in crisp embroidery, but it didn't tell the full story. Theo was more than a doctor. He was a co-founder of Vital Path, a medical tech startup revolutionizing affordable care, a venture that had made him a millionaire before he'd turned 30. Success hadn't hardened him, though. If anything, it had deepened his resolve to bridge the gap between the hospital's sterile efficiency and the raw, human need he saw daily. Theo had noticed Madeline weeks ago, though he'd never admit how often his gaze sought her out. It wasn't just her beauty, though that was undeniable. The way her hair caught the light, the graceful curve of her neck as she bent over her mop. It was her presence, The way she moved through the hospital's chaos with a quiet strength, like a candle burning steady in a gale. He'd seen her with her mother Eleanor during one of her checkups. Madeline's hand steadying the older woman's frail frame, her voice soft as she read from a worn paperback. He'd watched her in the pediatric ward, her laughter coaxing smiles from children who hadn't smiled in days. Each moment was a thread, weaving a picture of a woman who gave more than she had, who loved fiercely despite her own scarcity. He wanted to know her. The thought struck him in quiet moments, like now, as he glanced up from his chart and saw her silhouette at the far end of the hall, her mop moving in rhythmic sweeps. But Theo was no stranger to hesitation. In medical school, he'd been the quiet one, the kid from a modest family who'd clawed his way to success through grit and late nights. Approaching Madeline felt like crossing a chasm. Her reserved demeanor, the way she seemed to shrink from attention, made him fear he'd intrude, that he'd be just another voice demanding something she couldn't give. Madeline, oblivious to Theo's gaze, paused to lean against the wall, her breath catching in a shallow, stubborn cough that had lingered for weeks. She pressed a hand to her chest, willing it away. It was nothing, she told herself, just fatigue, just the damp chill of the hospital air. But the dizziness that followed, a slow tilt of the world, was harder to dismiss. She gripped the mop tighter, her knuckles whitening. She couldn't afford to be sick. Not with Eleanor's next prescription due, not with rent looming like a specter. The hospital was her lifeline, both her prison and her purpose. To falter now would be to let everything crumble. Theo's eyes narrowed as he caught the moment, her pause, the way she steadied herself, the faint wheeze in her breath. He'd seen enough patients to recognize the signs: pallor, fatigue, the subtle sway of someone pushing past their limits. Concern flared, sharp and insistent. He took a step toward her, then stopped, his hand hovering over the chart. What could he say? "You look unwell?" It felt patronizing, invasive. Yet the thought of doing nothing gnawed at him. He scribbled a note to check the cleaning staff's schedules, a pretext to learn more about her, to find a way to help without overstepping. Madeline straightened, forcing a deep breath. She had to keep moving. The pediatric ward was next, and she'd promised little Sophie a new paper crane, one with blue wings to match her favorite blanket. As she pushed her cart down the hall, her cough returned, sharper this time, a blade in her chest. She ignored it, just as she ignored the ache in her legs, the hollow pang in her stomach. She was Madeline Harper, the girl who kept going, who carried her mother's hopes and her own buried dreams in the quiet spaces of her heart. Theo watched her disappear around the corner, his pen still in hand. The hospital hummed around him, indifferent to the small drama unfolding in its shadows. He didn't know her story, not yet, but he felt its weight, the resilience, the sacrifice, the unspoken pain. And in that moment, under the flickering lights, he made a silent vow: to see her, not as a cleaner or a stranger, but as the woman whose light refused to dim, even in the darkest of nights. The hospital's pulse never slowed, but in the late hours, its rhythm grew jagged. Urgent footsteps, the sharp beep of monitors, the low hum of lives hanging in balance. Madeline Harper pushed her cleaning cart through the ER's labyrinth, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across her pale face. Her long black hair, usually a flowing veil, was tied back in a messy knot, damp with sweat despite the chill. The cough that had plagued her for weeks had worsened, each spasm a fist tightening around her chest. She ignored it, as she ignored the dizziness that blurred the edges of her vision. She had to finish her shift. Eleanor's next prescription was due, and the landlord's patience was thinner than her paycheck. Madeline's hands trembled as she wrung out her mop, the motion mechanical, her mind drifting to the pediatric ward where Sophie waited for her blue-winged paper crane. The thought brought a fleeting smile, but it faded as another cough tore through her, forcing her to lean against the cart. She pressed a hand to her forehead, willing the world to steady. Just one more hour, she told herself. One more hour, and she could collapse in the break room, steal a moment to breathe. Dr. Theo Langston, stood at the nurse's station, his blonde hair catching the light as he reviewed a patient's chart. The ER was a storm tonight. Car accidents, fevers, broken bones. But his thoughts kept drifting to Madeline. He'd seen her earlier, her sway against the wall, the way her breath hitched. His vow to see her, to help her, burned in his chest. But he hadn't found the right moment. Approaching a cleaner mid-shift felt wrong, like crossing an invisible line. Yet the signs he'd noted, pallor, fatigue, that stubborn cough screamed of something serious, something she couldn't outrun. As Madeline mopped a quiet stretch of hallway near the triage area, the dizziness surged, a tidal wave that drowned her senses. Her knees buckled, and the mop slipped from her grasp, clattering against the floor with a sound that echoed like a gunshot. She reached for the wall, but her fingers found only air, and she crumpled, her body folding into itself as darkness swallowed her. Theo's head snapped up at the noise, his pulse spiking. He dropped the chart and sprinted down the hall, his white coat flaring behind him. "Madeline!" he called, his voice sharp with fear as he saw her crumpled form, her hair spilling across the tiles like spilled ink. He knelt beside her, his hands swift but gentle, checking her pulse, her breathing. Her skin was clammy, her breath shallow, each inhale laced with a faint wheeze. "Stay with me," he murmured, scooping her into his arms. She was alarmingly light, her frame fragile beneath her oversized sweater. He carried her to an empty exam room, barking orders to a nurse who trailed behind. "IV fluids, stat, prep antibiotics and a chest x-ray." The nurse nodded, rushing to comply, while Theo laid Madeline on the bed, his hands steady despite the storm in his chest. He hooked her to a monitor, the green line of her heartbeat a fragile reassurance. Her cough, her exhaustion, it wasn't just fatigue. Pneumonia, he suspected, worsened by neglect and overwork. He started an IV, his fingers deft as he inserted the line, his mind racing with questions he couldn't ask, a woman who couldn't answer. Through the night, Theo stayed by her side, adjusting drips, checking vitals, his blue eyes tracing her face as she stirred in fitful sleep. The hospital's chaos faded, the world narrowing to this small room, this woman whose strength had captivated him. He thought of her laughter in the pediatric ward, her quiet devotion to her mother. She was more than a cleaner, more than a stranger. She was a flame, flickering but unbroken, and he wouldn't let it go out. Dawn crept through the blinds, painting the room in soft gold. Madeline stirred, her eyelids fluttering as awareness returned. Pain lingered in her chest, duller now, but panic surged as she registered the IV line, the sterile bed. Her job, Eleanor, her absence would cost her everything. She reached for the IV, fumbling to pull it free, her voice a hoarse rasp. "I have to work. I can't stay here." Theo, seated by her bed, caught her hand, his touch warm and firm. "Madeline, stop. You're not going anywhere." His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear, a plea she didn't understand. "You collapsed. You're sick, pneumonia likely. You need rest, not a mop." She blinked, her mind sluggish, her gaze locking with his. "Why do you care?" she whispered, the words raw, unguarded. "I'm just the cleaner, nobody." Theo's expression softened, a smile tugging at his lips, not mocking but tender. "Nobody? Madeline, I've seen you. The way you sit with your mother, reading to her when you're half dead on your feet. The way you make those kids laugh, like you're not carrying the world." He hesitated, his thumb brushing her knuckles, a gesture so small it stole her breath. "I've wanted to talk to you for weeks. I just didn't know how." Madeline's cheeks flushed, warmth spreading through her despite the chill of the IV. His words felt like a lifeline, but they also terrified her. No one had seen her like that, not since her father died years ago, leaving her and Eleanor to fend for themselves. She looked away, her voice barely audible. "I noticed you too. The way you talk to patients like they're people, not cases, but I'm not someone you should waste time on." Theo leaned closer, his voice low, earnest. "You're not a waste of time, you're the opposite." The air between them thickened, charged with something neither could name. A nurse knocked, breaking the spell, her arms full of discharge papers. Theo stepped back, his professional mask slipping into place, but his eyes lingered on Madeline. "I'll get you something to eat," he said, standing. "Stay put." He returned minutes later with a bowl of warm porridge, the steam curling in the morning light. "Eat," he said, handing it to her, his fingers brushing hers. She took a tentative bite, the simple act grounding her, and their eyes met again, a silent question hanging between them. Was this care or something more? Madeline didn't know, but as the porridge warmed her, so did his presence, a spark igniting in the quiet of the exam room. The hospital hummed beyond the door, indifferent to the moment unfolding within. Madeline clutched the bowl, her heart unsteady, not from illness, but from the weight of being seen. Theo watched her, his own heart racing, knowing this was only the beginning. Whatever lay ahead, he wouldn't let her face it alone. The hospital's sterile hum lingered in Madeline Harper's ears as she left the exam room, her steps unsteady but determined. The warmth of Theo Langston's porridge and his quiet confession still clung to her, a fragile glow against the cold reality of her life. Her cough had softened, dulled by antibiotics, but her heart raced with something new, hope or perhaps fear, stirred by his words. "You're not a waste of time." She clutched her worn sweater tighter, the IV's faint bruise throbbing under her sleeve. Work awaited, Eleanor's bills loomed, and yet, for the first time in years, she felt seen. But seen by whom? A doctor whose kindness felt too vast, too undeserved for someone like her. Days later, Madeline sat in the hospital break room, a crumpled newsletter in her hands. The headline screamed success. Dr. Theodore Langston, VitalPath co-founder, revolutionizes healthcare. A glossy photo showed Theo, his blonde hair catching the light, his smile confident yet warm. The article detailed his startup's millions, his awards, his vision for affordable care. A millionaire, a visionary, a man whose world sparkled with possibility, while hers was a dim maze of mops and overdue rent. Her stomach twisted, the porridge's memory souring. She was a cleaner, scraping by in a borrowed coat, her dreams of accounting buried under her mother's illness. Theo's care, his lingering glances. Were they pity? A fleeting kindness for a struggling soul? The realization crushed her. She folded the newsletter, shoving it into her locker, and resolved to bury the spark between them. She couldn't afford to dream of a man like Theo, not when her life was a fragile stack of bills and responsibilities. At her next shift, she avoided the ER, taking longer routes to dodge his usual rounds. Follow-up appointments became a game of evasion. She scheduled them on his days off, claiming conflicts when the nurse pressed. Her cough lingered, a stubborn shadow, but she swallowed it with cheap cough syrup, telling herself it was enough. She couldn't face him, not with a chasm of their worlds laid bare. Theo felt her absence like a bruise. The pediatric ward, once alive with her laughter, was quieter now, the children asking for Maddie with puzzled frowns. He'd catch glimpses of her cart in distant halls, her dark hair vanishing around corners. But she was a ghost, slipping through his fingers. The memory of their exam room conversation, her shy admission, the warmth of her hand, haunted him. Had he misread her? Pushed too far. His days, once brightened by her presence, grew heavy. His smiles to patience a little less steady. He checked her chart, noting her missed appointments, worry gnawing at him. Pneumonia didn't vanish on willpower alone. One rainy evening, as Theo left the hospital, umbrella in hand, he froze. There, across the street, stood Madeline, her thin sweater soaked through as she shielded her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Clara, from the downpour. Clara's grocery bag sagged in her frail arms, and Madeline, laughing softly, tucked her own body closer, letting the rain drench her to keep Clara dry. The sight pierced Theo, her selflessness, her quiet strength, unchanged despite her distance. His heart, already raw, couldn't bear it. He crossed the street, rain slapping his face, his umbrella forgotten. "Madeline!" His voice cut through the storm, sharp with frustration. She turned, her green eyes wide, rain plastering her hair to her cheeks. Clara glanced between them, sensing the tension, and murmured about waiting under an awning. Madeline hesitated, then faced Theo, her posture braced, as if expecting a blow. "Why are you avoiding me?" he demanded, stepping closer, water dripping from his coat. "You miss appointments. You dodge me in the halls. What did I do?" His voice cracked, betraying the hurt he'd buried. Madeline's lips parted, but words faltered. The rain roared, a curtain around them, blurring the world. "It's not you," she whispered, her voice nearly lost. "It's me. I read about you, your company, your life. You're everything, and I'm nothing. A cleaner, a nobody." Theo's eyes blazed, not with anger, but with something fiercer. "Nothing? Madeline, you're the woman who lights up a ward, who gives everything to others. You think I care about status?" He stepped closer, rain mingling with the urgency in his voice. "I see you, and Emotion choked him, and before he could stop himself, he cupped her face, his hands warm against her cold skin, and kissed her. The kiss was desperate, sweet, a collision of longing and truth under the storm's relentless drum. Madeline froze, then melted, her hands clutching his coat as the world dissolved. For a moment, there was only them, rain, warmth, the heartbeat of something real. She pulled back, trembling, tears mixing with rain. "I love you," she confessed, the words raw, "but I don't belong in your world. I never will." Theo gripped her hands, his gaze unwavering. "My world is wherever you are. Love isn't titles or money, it's this." He pressed her hand to his chest, where his heart pounded. "Don't run from me, please." Madeline's breath hitched, his words a lifeline she wanted to grasp, but feared would slip. The rain slowed, a soft drizzle now, and Clara's cough from the awning broke the spell. Madeline stepped back, her eyes locked on Theo's, a storm of doubt and hope swirling within her. "I need time," she murmured, turning to help Clara, her soaked sweater heavy with more than rain. Theo watched her go, his heart a tangle of ache and resolve. The hospital loomed behind him, its lights a cold reminder of the distance she'd built. But her confession, "I love you," echoed, a spark he wouldn't let die. Whatever doubts held her, he'd wait, fight, prove that love could bridge any chasm, no matter how wide. The rain had stopped, but its echo lingered in Madeline Harper's mind, as did the press of Theo Langston's lips, his desperate kiss a brand on her heart. Her confession, "I love you," hung between them like a fragile thread, stretched taut by her doubts. She'd fled that rainy street, her soaked sweater heavy, her neighbor Clara's grateful chatter a blur. Back in her cramped apartment, Madeline sat by Eleanor's bedside, the hum of the oxygen machine of physics, her mother's breathing a steady rhythm. Theo's words, "My world is wherever you are," echoed, but so did the hospital newsletter's glossy truth. Theo was a millionaire, a visionary, worlds apart from her life of mops and overdue bills. She was a cleaner, Her dreams of accounting rusted under years of sacrifice. Love couldn't bridge that chasm, she told herself. Yet the memory of his warmth, his belief in her, refused to fade. Madeline threw herself back into work, scrubbing hospital floors with a fervor that drowned her thoughts. She dodged Theo's shifts, scheduling her hours to avoid the ER. Her lingering cough, a dull ache, she masked with syrup and willpower. The pediatric ward felt emptier without her visits, but she couldn't face the children's questions or risk seeing Theo's blue eyes, searching for her. Her heart ached, not just for him, but for the woman she might have been, the one who dared to dream before Eleanor's illness stole her future. Yet, even in her isolation, small mysteries began to pierce her defenses. It started with a package left at her doorstep, a plain brown box with no sender's name. Inside, a bottle of high-quality multivitamins, the kind she'd never afford, nestled in tissue paper. A note read, "For your strength, from a friend." Madeline's breath caught, her fingers tracing the elegant script. Was it Theo? The thought warmed her, but doubt crept in. Why would he bother? Days later, another gift. A flyer for a scholarship program offering night classes in accounting, slipped under her door with a single line. "You said you loved numbers. This is for you." Her old dream, accounting, flickered like a half-forgotten song, but the sender's anonymity unnerved her. She tucked the flyer away, fear whispering she'd fail, that she wasn't enough. Theo, meanwhile, felt her absence like a wound. The hospital's bustle couldn't fill the void left by her laughter, her quiet grace. He'd orchestrated the gifts through discreet channels, hoping to nudge her toward possibility without overwhelming her. Her missed appointments gnawed at him. Pneumonia's shadow could linger, and her health mattered more than his pride. He worked longer hours, pouring himself into Vital Path's mission, but his thoughts strayed to Madeline. Her shy smile in the exam room, her tearful confession in the rain. He'd promised to wait, but her silence tested his resolve. Had he pushed too far, scared her with his intensity? One night, after a grueling shift, Madeline slumped at her kitchen table, the scholarship flyer open before her. The deadline loomed, 2 days away. Her laptop glowed, the application half-filled, her cursor blinking like a challenge. She'd started college once, years ago, before Eleanor's diagnosis forced her to drop out. Numbers had been her refuge, their logic a balm against chaos. But failure loomed large. What if she couldn't keep up? What if she proved the world right, that she was just a cleaner, nothing more? Yet Theo's voice echoed, "You're the opposite." The vitamins sat on her counter, a quiet testament to someone's faith in her. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then began to type, haltingly at first, then with growing resolve. She wrote of her mother, her sacrifices, her buried dreams. In the motivation field she typed, "Because someone believes I'm enough," and hit submit, her heart pounding with a mix of terror and hope. The next day, Theo found her in a quiet hallway, restocking her cart. He'd hesitated, but her pale face, the faint wheeze in her breath, spurred him forward. "Madeline," he said softly, his white coat crisp but his eyes gentle. She stiffened, her hands tightening on a bottle of cleaner, but didn't flee. "I'm worried about you. You're still not well." "I'm fine," she said. Her voice clipped, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of vulnerability. "I can't afford to stop." Theo stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "You don't have to do this alone. I meant what I said. Your health, your future, it matters." He paused, searching her face. "I heard you applied for a scholarship. That's incredible." Her eyes widened, a flush creeping up her cheeks. "How did you—" She stopped, realization dawning. "The vitamins, the flyer. That was you." He nodded, a shy smile breaking through. "I wanted you to see what I see. You're not just a cleaner, Madeline. You're capable of so much more." Her throat tightened, tears pricking her eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "What if I fail?" "Then you try again," he said, his voice steady, "and I'll be here, cheering you on." He hesitated, then added, "I'd like you to join our outreach program at Vital Path. Not as a favor, but because you understand people, their struggles, their hopes. You could make a difference." Madeline blinked, the offer overwhelming. Work with Theo? Her doubts roared, but so did the spark of possibility. I'll think about it," she said, her voice soft but not dismissive. Over the next weeks, she balanced her cleaning shifts with night classes, her mind buzzing with balance sheets and ledgers. The work was hard, but numbers welcomed her back like old friends. Theo checked in, not as a savior but a partner, sharing coffee breaks where they talked. Not of love, not yet, but of dreams, fears, and the world they wanted to build. Their conversations grew easier, her shyness giving way to quiet confidence. She saw herself through his eyes, not as a shadow, but as a woman with a voice, a purpose. One evening, after acing her first accounting quiz, Madeline found Theo waiting outside the community center where her classes were held. He held 2 cups of tea, steam curling in the cool air. "Heard you crushed it," he said, his grin boyish, proud. She laughed, a sound lighter than she'd thought possible. "I didn't fail. That's something." "It's everything," he said, handing her a cup. Their fingers brushed, and the spark from that rainy kiss flared, softer now, steadier. They sat on a bench, the city humming around them, and talked until the stars emerged. Madeline felt it then, a shift, not just in her future, but in her heart. She wasn't running anymore. She was beginning. The late spring air carried a gentle warmth, threading through the bustling courtyard of the newly minted Hope Haven Community Clinic. Balloons bobbed above folding chairs. Children darted between tables, laden with juice and cookies, and a bright ribbon stretched across the clinic's double doors, ready to be cut. Madeline Harper stood near the entrance, her dark hair catching the sunlight, her blouse crisp against her skin. At 28, she was no longer just a cleaner. She was an outreach coordinator, her name badge a quiet testament to a year of transformation. Her green eyes, once shadowed by exhaustion, now sparkled with nervous awe. A year ago, she'd been too poor to afford a doctor's visit. Now, she welcomed families who mirrored her past, nervous, hopeful, clinging to fragile dreams. Madeline smoothed her skirt, her fingers trembling not from fear, but from the weight of standing in a moment she'd never imagined. Her accounting classes were thriving, her grades a steady climb, and her work with Vital Path had given her purpose, a voice to reach those the system often overlooked. Yet, the memory of Theo Langston's rainy kiss, his unwavering belief in her, anchored her. Their bond had deepened over months of shared coffees, late-night talks, and quiet moments where love grew not in grand gestures, but in mutual respect. Still, standing here, part of something larger, she felt a flutter of doubt. Could she truly belong in this world? Theo stood at the podium, his blonde hair glinting, his rolled-up sleeves revealing the ease of a man comfortable in his purpose. At 33, he was still Vital Path's visionary. But today, he was simply Theo, his blue eyes sweeping the crowd with a humble pride. The clinic was his dream realized, a place where care met dignity, where no one was turned away. As he stepped to the microphone, the crowd hushed, their faces a mosaic of hope. "Good evening," he began, his voice clear, steady. "A year ago, we envisioned a clinic that didn't just heal bodies, but restore souls. Today, that vision lives, not in walls or charts, but in people." His gaze found Madeline, a soft intensity in his eyes. One woman, who once doubted her worth, now holds the hands of others. She didn't walk into my life as a patient, but as a mirror, showing me why we do this. The crowd stirred, heads turning to Madeline, who flushed, her heart pounding. Theo stepped down, no fanfare, and took her hand, his touch warm, grounding. "I'm not speaking as a doctor or a founder," he said, his voice low, meant for her alone. "I'm just a man who's watched you become who you were always meant to be. You believed in others, Madeline. I'm asking you to believe in yourself." Tears pricked her eyes, not from shame but from a deep, unshakable belonging. She squeezed his hand, nodding, words too heavy to speak. The crowd applauded as the ribbon fell, the clinic doors opening to laughter and chatter. But Madeline felt suspended, as if the world had paused to let this moment breathe. Theo's hand in hers was a promise kept, not of rescue, but of partnership, of rising together. As the sun dipped, casting golden light across the courtyard, Madeline and Theo slipped away from the celebration. They walked down a familiar street, past faded murals and small shops, until they reached the corner store where Madeline had once worked a second job, bagging groceries to make ends meet. The neon sign flickered, its hum a nostalgic echo. Madeline stopped, her purse light against her hip, and pulled out a crumpled payslip, yellowed from her first cleaning shift years ago. She held it up. The ink faded, but the memory was sharp. "I kept this," she said, her voice soft, a smile tugging at her lips. "It was proof I could keep going, even when I had nothing. When Eleanor was sick, when I thought I'd break, this reminded me I didn't." Theo took the paper, his fingers brushing hers, holding it like something sacred. "You didn't just keep going," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "You changed me, Madeline. That night in the rain, your strength, your heart, it made me want to be better, to build something real." She laughed, the sound bright, unguarded. "I thought I'd always be the background, the one who cleans up after everyone else's story. But you saw me, Theo. You made me believe I could be more." "You already were," he replied, his voice low, fervent. "I just got lucky enough to notice." He stepped closer, the street's hum fading, the world narrowing to them. "So," he said, a grin breaking through, "should we buy something? I owe you a real dinner." "Only if I keep the receipt," she teased, her eyes dancing. They stepped into the store, past the checkout where her past lingered, its aisles holding no grand romance but something better. Honesty, memory, the quiet beauty of ordinary things made extraordinary by love. Madeline felt it in the brush of Theo's shoulder, the ease of their laughter as they picked out ingredients for a meal neither had planned, but both craved. Back outside, the evening air was cool, the city alive with distant horns and soft lights. They walked hand in hand, their steps unhurried, the payslip tucked safely in Madeline's purse. She thought of the vitamins, the scholarship, the clinic, small acts that had rebuilt her, not because Theo saved her, but because he believed she could save herself. And she had. Her classes would lead to a degree, her work at the clinic would touch lives, and her love for Theo would pave a future neither had to face alone. The hospital loomed in the distance, its lights a beacon of their beginning. Madeline glanced at Theo, his profile soft in the dusk, and felt a certainty settle in her bones. She wasn't the cleaner anymore, nor the millionaire's muse. She was Madeline Harper, a woman who'd walked through shadows and emerged whole, not because of love, but alongside it. Theo's hand tightened around hers, a silent vow, and she smiled, not shyly but boldly, like someone who'd claimed her place in her own story. As they turned toward home, the stars above whispered of promises kept, of love that didn't need to shout to be true. The world spun on, but here, in this quiet moment, they were enough. Two souls, seen and cherished, walking forward together. Thank you for joining us in Kindness in the Rain, a story of love, resilience, and the quiet power of seeing one another. Madeline and Theo's journey reminds us that small acts of kindness can spark extraordinary change. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Did their story touch your heart? Share in the comments what moved you, or how you've seen kindness ripple in your own life. Your voice matters to our community. A heartfelt thank you for listening, for being part of this tale of hope. Subscribe and hit the notification bell to catch our next story, where more souls connect in unexpected ways. Until then, keep spreading kindness, and we'll meet again soon under new skies.